All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video we are going to talk about Errol Spence Jr. and Keith Thurman's fight and a bunch of fan backlash for the fight taking place, and also the strategic value, according to an expert that I talked to about it, and how it may actually lead to an Errol Spence Jr. versus Terence Crawford fight. Let's chop it up about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video we're going to be in the 147-pound division, where in the year 2023 we are actually going to get good fights taking place. The first one, it seems, will be between Errol Spence Jr., the three-belt holding welterweight titleist, the #1 welterweight in the world, in my opinion, and Keith Thurman, who is a former unified champion in the division. That fight should be, provided all of these rumors, this, that, and the other are true, should be taking place in April. That is, and April is just 10 short weeks away, which means that announcement should be coming soon, and those two guys should be getting into training camp. Now, strange to me, though, there's been a lot of backlash about it. Now, before I get into that, though, and what that means, let me welcome you back to the channel. If you are a longtime subscriber and supporter, thank you so much for your continued support in the live streams that we do. And also, thank you to all the supporters that support videos like this in the super thanks, which is a heart and a $ below. Shout out to everyone that does that. Thank you guys so much, because that really is how we're able to continue the channel. And all other content creators on YouTube that you may like, don't care if they do animal videos. I'm a big fan of a guy that does named Casual Geographics. Been watching his content for several days and gonna make sure to support him because, hey man, that's how content creators get it done. Now let's get on to the subject matter of this video. Man, y'all some wild people out there. It just seems like, man, when you get something good, people switch up what their opinions are about stuff just to have a problem with something. Now, what am I talking about? Errol Spence Jr. and Keith Thurman are going to be fighting, or supposed to be fighting, in April. And there's a whole lot of people out there that have a problem with the fight for a very, very bizarre reason. Now, the reason is that many people are claiming that they're upset. Let me put my parentheses on the right word. Claiming that they're upset about it, and it's ridiculous, and it doesn't make any sense. Is that Errol and Terence are going to be fighting at 154 and not that Errol and Keith Thurman will be fighting at 147 and not, 154 and not 147 pounds. As a result, there won't be any titles on the line. And this, for some reason, is a travesty. I can only repeat the words, that it doesn't make sense to fight him at 150. I thought he had a mandatory. And that's why he couldn't fight Terence Crawford next, because he had a mandatory. Well, let me break it to you. If the WBC is okay with it, with those guys fighting at 154 and not 147 for a fight that they ordered, and it being a non-title fight, I'm sure that WBC mandatory will be satisfied. So it may not actually be a 147-pound fight, but if they fight and the 147-pound mandatory goes away, then what difference does it make? Especially if Errol decided not to fight Keith Thurman and was actually stripped of the 147-pound title because he wouldn't do that. That allowing him to fight at 154 is called a compromise, one where the WBC keeps Errol Spence Jr. as the champion of the WBC at 147 and may actually allow for an undisputed fight at 147, where if they may not have allowed him to fight at 154, then Errol could have dropped that belt, went and fought somebody else, and now you have to, the WBC has to have somebody fight for the vacant title, and so does the WBA, and so does the IBF. Doesn't seem very complicated to me. Now, also, what difference does it make if Errol Spence Jr. goes to 154 as it relates to Terence Crawford? Because Terence Crawford literally turned down the fight with Errol. I know people want to keep skipping past that little part with their grand hopes with their mentality that it's Errol Spence Jr.'s fault that fight didn't happen. But when Terence Crawford responded to it, he said, yep, well, you know, what you gonna do? Exactly, what you gonna do, which means nothing, because you weren't gonna fight the guy anyway. However, did speak with some friends of mine who I really do value their opinion in the sport of boxing. As you know, we occasionally have them come by the channel, but their take on it was, and I agree with this, is look, this is actually something, and I said this in my live stream, this is something that may actually lead to Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford really getting that fight done. Because if Errol goes to 154 pounds and fights Keith Thurman and does not, and for any protected amount of time, maybe one, and by that I mean more than one fight, where Terence Crawford has to fight 2 fights and not just one fight, selling the idea of a fight with Errol Spence Jr., that may actually force the backers that he has prices down on Terence Crawford. Where if Terence Crawford really wants to make a big payday, Errol Spence Jr. may be his only option to do that. Otherwise, he's going to have to stay down there with the young lions in that weight division, or he's going to have to retire. And that of the young lions, I'm talking about Jaron Ennis, Virgil Ortiz. I wouldn't really call. I think Virgil Ortiz is going to beat Amanda Stanionis, but he's going to have to go through those type of fights. Or he's going to have to fight WBO mandatories, guys from Europe, and seeing as the numbers for his fight with David Avanesyan didn't do that well, how long are people going to be willing to back and pay him big dollars for fights like that? Probably not a lot. And that's not even and I would call that a non-traditional, a non-mainstream promoter that did that, because you're not going to get that out of Bob Arum, Eddie Hearn, or any fighter that fights on the PBC that would be promoted by a TGB card. More than likely, you're not going to get any of that stuff. So if Terence Crawford runs out of options, hey man, he may be actually open to watching the fight that we want to see. Now, Sean Porter had said something about, him seeing the fight between Errol and Terence taking place at 154 pounds. And I think that is something that it would probably be more realistic than 147 pounds. Because again, Terence Crawford seems like he, in my opinion, wants to kind of milk out and see how many paydays he can get selling the Errol Spence Jr. fight, or at least the backers or the PR people around Terence Crawford seem to want to do that. So, and Errol said that, hey man, I'm going up to 154 pounds. He goes up to 154 pounds and stays there, because more than likely he's going to stay there. I do not believe he's going to squeeze back down to 147. He's going to come back down to 147 to fight Stanionis. So if he goes to 154 and makes fights at 154 pounds, then Terence Crawford can move up there and they can have a non-title fight. And really, that non-title fight is just as valuable as the title, as the fight with all the belts on there, because dude, people ain't really tripping like that on belts. They're really tripping on them only when it's time for their fighter, for them to argue that their fighter deserves more money, or that their fighter is better than another fighter, or achieved more. But when it comes to actually watching the fights, man, look, dude, people ain't really tripping like that, because if you look at the Gervonta Davis fight, all of the Gervonta Davis's fights for the last 6 or 7 fights, those are much bigger events than any of the legitimate championship fights that take place at 135 or 140. It's just kind of how it works. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Deuces.